Welcome to the Nonsense in the Chaos. This is the 10th episode, which is extremely exciting. And I am your host, Jolie Rose. This week, I have the absolute pleasure of speaking to a really good friend of mine called Denis Whyte. Denis is an incredible human being. He's an absolute angel, which we talk about a lot. And he is someone that I had the pleasure of meeting about 4 years ago now. Actually, probably about 5 years ago, when we walked with Extinction Rebellion from Brighton to London, and I met him in London, and then he came and joined me on some of the pilgrimages that I've walked across the UK. Also, in his previous life, was a film producer, a documentary maker, and was right at the forefront of the whole hippie 60s, 70s yoga, Buddhism, esoteric Indian and Tibetan faiths, and travelled all over the world, meeting gurus and making documentaries about them. And so has got lots of celebrity friends. And yeah, he's a proper lovey darling and he's adorable. And I can't wait for you to get to hear his wisdom and just look at the world through his eyes, because he's a beautiful soul. And we begin this podcast talking about Jonathan Kay. So I'd mentioned that I'd done a podcast with him recently, and he starts telling me about how Jonathan ran amok at a festival that Denis goes to regularly. So that's the conversation we drop into immediately, and I hope you enjoy. See you on. So what, Jonathan's performing at a festival you're going to?
Yeah, so there's this festival called Wasinga, which has been going on for like 12 years. And it's 150, 200 people. And Jonathan's been before, and he took over the whole festival. It's a small thing. And there were really elaborate acts and events. For instance, there was a tree full of people who did those, they're on straps kind of thing, and they tumble down. And there was a burning of a gigantic tetrahedron that somebody had made out of wood, packed with fireworks and stuff like that. Anyway, that was all grist to his mill, where whatever was arranged, Jonathan took over. And he led the entire group on this, half of which were completely entranced and haven't stopped talking about it 10 years later. And half of which are outraged, who this man, what's he doing?
He's often said that he would love to go to watch Wind in the Willows or something at the National Theatre, and just he has to make sure he doesn't sit on the front row when he goes and watches plays, because he just always wants to just jump up and be like, "Hi, I'm Dole's cousin," and just wander onto the stage and start performing with them, and they'll have to just deal with it.
Oh, God.
Which would be incredible. But yeah, he's definitely a force of nature.
Anyway, every year in the past, I've looked forward to this with tremendous excitement. And this year, I can barely bother to get my shit together and go, you know what I mean? It's a kind of non-engagement with the world almost, like a hermit-like thing. I think it would be really good for me to break out of this. So for the last, say, 9 months, I've been painting every day and night for about 12 hours, maybe more sometimes, decorating these bits of the backs of packaging, domestic packaging, and accumulating probably 1,000 plus of these tiny little bits of art, and not seeing anybody except the occasional friend, and doing my work, doing my healing and stuff, but that's an hour a day or 2 hours a day, and receding from life and everything. And I wouldn't say that's not uncommon either, just from chatting to people, What about you?
Well, yeah, it was interesting because you said that last time I spoke to you as well. And so you're continuing with that.
At least I'm consistent, boring, but
yeah.
Consistent, yeah.
And then you come and do a pilgrimage with me, and then you really love life again, and then you're all engaged again for a bit.
That may be what I need, actually. Yeah, that's it. That did have that effect. It's a sort of... I guess it's more of a physical thing in a sense. It reminded me of when I used to do yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong especially. There was this daily practice that happened all day long. We would set off at 9 and pack in about 6 or whatever time it was. And the intervening period, it was plod, 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 plod. And that plodding, I think, has a resetting purpose. And not just physically, of course, I I felt physically but much, much better, but muscular and bone and everything was stimulated. But my whole system was, I think, the grounding and, even though you're wearing hiking boots and stuff, and that alone is extraordinary. And then there's the company, which was another whole, I was going to say ordeal, but it wasn't an ordeal, obviously. These are friends, you know what I mean? It was a process, And there was also, it was touching all the parts of me. It was touching my emotional field. I was going to ask you that about pounding the earth, which brings stuff up. I mean, you just can't help it. And I remember walking behind one particular group on the first big one I did with you, a big pilgrimage, and they were singing in front of me. We were walking through some woods. I was going through this absolute, unbelievable agony of revisiting this childhood trauma that I'd had. And now I was absolutely sort of tortured, but it was a healing. So I was about 50 yards behind them. They were, hey, nonny, nonny, down in the woods in front of me. It was an emotionally healing experience. And then there was the fact that was happening to all of us in our differing ways and differing levels. Everybody was getting that grounding and healing experience. And, I think you got it times 10. And because you were carrying the emotional focus of the group and to a lesser extent, the physical focus, because it was we're doing this tomorrow. It was your organization. So I noticed on a couple of occasions after you finished, it's been like divorce time or total kind of collapse time. The effect it has on you must be really, as the leader of the group, must be really increased enormously. Is that, do you feel?
Especially after the first one was so intense, and it didn't, although it was the group and it was the tiredness of doing it, it was a lot to do with the trauma of the planet more than anything. That was the thing that broke me at the end, was getting up there, and I needed some time apart from people. Someone said that they thought they were going to go home instead of sticking around to do the performance. And that just broke me because I wanted to go home. The commitment was that we'd walk up there together, we'd create this performance and we'd go do the performance. And the fact that someone was going to just leave, and that they could, of course they could do whatever they wanted, but that just completely took the wind out from my sails, because I really wanted to go home too. I'd had enough and I was tired and all the rest of it. And so I went and had a few days on the island on my own and just chilled out, because it was people can do what they want to do, and whoever's left and whoever's there and sticks around, that's fine. I need to almost not know and just go, and it will figure itself out. And actually everyone stayed, so no one actually did leave. But when I then stopped, I went to a shop and I heard that the delegates had got on helicopters and everything and flown away and had left, and nothing had really been done. And I found out since then that because of Brexit, quite a lot of the leaders purposefully didn't do much at that particular COP as a snub to Boris Johnson and to the English government for choosing to leave. So, yeah, it just felt really defeated, especially from connecting to the land so deeply. I came out of the shop and had a moment where I nearly ran into the sea and nearly swam out to sea and sort of sank onto a jetty and cried. It was a very end of film drama moment.
Do
it took a long time to get over that.
Do you still believe that those official political things are ever going to solve any of the problem?
No. I mean, I didn't even at the time at all. I didn't think anything was really going to come out of COP26. There were points in time earlier to this where we could have put some solar panels on roofs and done a few things and worked together, and it could have been an opportunity and for it to be a bit more of an easy ride. Whereas now it's going to have to be a lot more extreme. The changes now aren't going to be able to be as relaxed and subtle. It's gone past that point now. So I'm looking a lot at the moment about the imagination. There's a really good book, From What Is to What If, that Megan talked about in one of the earlier podcasts. And I've been reading it and it's so brilliant. And there's a quote in that which is that this isn't a climate crisis we're following. It's a it's a crisis of the imagination, that actually anything's possible, but we need to imagine it. And we're at the point in time where our imaginations are lacking the most because we're scrolling and we're, just doing things to distract ourselves, and everything's vying for our attention. Because of the lack of attention span we now have, we're imagining less. And it's our imaginations that are going to come up with ways to move forward. And so it's a fight. It's a battle for our imagination and our inner world.
Gosh, fascinating.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be part of fighting for, because I love the imagination. I'm all about that. And the chapter this year at Boomtown is the revolution of imagination. So just it's sort of in the zeitgeist at the moment. That feels like it's in the ether. But yeah, fighting for.
And of course, we limit the imagination to being a thought process. It's kind of, but it's not. It's an interaction with other intelligences. And I wonder how much of our imagination is our own creative thought, our own original thought, and how much of it is just interaction with our angels or whomsoever. And I think because, that is, as far as I know, they haven't yet got somebody watching your imagination. I mean, they can watch your output, but they can't actually see what you're thinking. So it's a good place to start the revolution there.
Yeah, totally.
But, darling, for me, it's become so obvious that the elephant in the room of everybody's room is the fact that the room is packed with spirits, that we are denying that we are in a multidimensional world and that we are continuously being affected for good and for bad or whatever, and that we don't know anything about that because it's not allowed within our culture. I mean, in other cultures it is, of course, but and those cultures have tended to be suppressed at the time, their indigenous cultures and their tribal culture.
That was what I was about to say, is Jonathan, in his conversation with me last week, was talking about love being the moving force of the whole universe, that the whole thing, whatever this thing is love, and that everything is connected and the imagination is part of that everything's part of it. And we, like you say, we've limited ourselves to this very subjective experience of reality where we think this is the thinking, this is the heart, this is emotion, this is work time. Like, we just separate everything. We've separated ourselves from each other and from all of the experiences of spirit. And that was the thing that was interesting on the pilgrimages, was how everyone had very different experiences of what the lines were, like the energy lines, whether they were real, whether they weren't, whether they were something you could actually feel physically, or whether it was more of a synchronicities or just magical things happening around them. And just everyone had such different ways of interacting with them that I felt, for me, it's like they're all valid.
Yes.
And it's everyone's personal relationship to whatever's going on and their own sensitivities. And that's what's so fascinating about people. That's why I'm doing these interviews and talking to people, because everyone's a parallel universe living alongside each other.
Yeah.
We're actually all one, but we're all having this really fascinating subjective experience, which I think is a game or a play or something. We're here doing a thing. And it's really interesting. It's almost like, as one being, I'm there going, what's going on in Denis world then? What's that like? What's that experience like? Check each other's worlds out.
Truly, absolutely. And I think that's coming to the fore. Basically, there was a timeline for it and a sequential, breakdown. And the apocalypse, it means the tearing of the veils between the dimensions. So, apparently beneath us there's a demonic dimension of different spirits, entities, and above us there's the astral, and that is entirely different energetic space without time, and so on and so forth. And those veils, according to the Christian Bible and of course many other religious systems, are tearing, and so there's this leak through from above and below. And if you're sensitive, you're picking it up already. And it seems to be there's an awful lot more what you might call spirit activity in people's lives and generally around. And I think that's going to increase also. And, this podcast is like, we're right in the midst of something that's not going to happen for another 12,000 years, or if we live in this cyclical time. And also we're right at the very bottom. We're at 6 o'clock on the clock, having come down, descended. And now the end of Kali Yuga, as they say, the dark age of iron is coming to an end. Next spring solstice, darling, equinox on whatever it is, March 21st, next year, 2025, the end. So we have to go through this period of ekpyrosis, the conflagration. It's like just when you think things are picking up, you've got to be burnt, you've got to be purified, because there's a possibility that we are actually changing dimensions. It's not just an environmental thing. The world is changing and the weather is changing and this is changing and that is changing. It's the entirety of our world is changing, and our time and the energies that are coming in. People feel it. Everybody feels it. It's like the increasing insanity of politics and so on. And as you said, the winding down of imagination. All the songs are the same now. All the books are... there's... The kind of Hindu view was that there were two energies. There was like a creator God, and then he burst into two. He split into two, masculine and feminine. But it's not really anything to do. It obviously involves gender, but it's not. And they kind of saw the masculine as the theatre and the seats, and the feminine as the play and the actors and the audience. And the flow, and that's Shakti, and the experience of walking, or that daily plodding, certainly on the paths you took us on with along the ley lines and so on, you are kind of tapping in moment by moment to the wholeness. It took me 6 months to recover from 6 weeks walking. Not physically, I was much weller after the walk than I was before. I just couldn't settle. I just wasn't I was discombobulated by my interaction with the energies, which have never been so strong, according to the experts like Rory Duff and so on.
Yeah. I mean, I love I really feel it in me, the concepts, but that's not the word, the sense that we are going to vibrate into a different reality, and that's not... Neil Gaiman does it a lot actually in his work, and there's one where there's a kitten who goes to see a cat do a talk, and the cat is saying that once cats were big and humans were small, and they used to play with them and eat them and terrorize them, and then one day a human had a dream that they swapped places. And he went and told people this dream, and he kept going and moving around telling people this story, this dream, like a messiah, like telling people this good news that things will change. And then enough people went to sleep dreaming that dream, and the next morning they woke up and humans were big and cats were small. And so this cat was going around trying to talk the cats into having the dream. And I love that story, and it feels like that's what, when we're talking about this is what it reminds me of and makes me think or feel inside, is that it's not about us getting from A to B, like in terms of space travel or in terms of sorting the environment out or any of these things. In a way, it might be that it physically, literally plays out in an actual storyline, but there's also the possibility that you might completely just change channel, that you might be able to just change the remote and literally change the channel by enough of us going to sleep that night and dreaming and believing that something was possible. And regardless of any of that being true or real, us going through that process and doing that together and engaging our imagination will make any change happening more likely anyway. So I'm up for it, whatever. And I think it's just such good brain exercise and spiritual exercise to just imagine these things, because we need to use our imaginations. We can't just sit there going, oh, that won't work. Oh, that's not logical. Oh, that's not possible. And just do bugger all, which is what... Because I was an atheist for a long time and was really not... I denied all of this stuff for a very long time. And so I know what it feels like to be in that place, and it's very self-righteous and it's very correct. But at the same time, it was lacking, and I just one day just stood there and was like, it's Greggs, Bakers and tarmac and feral pigeons, and that's it. And I want more than this. And I used to have more than this when I was a born-again Christian. And actually, I miss what I got from that. So even if I might now be coming from a slightly more cynical place, like I embrace it all and I say yes to it all, and I also don't believe in it all at all. Like I don't believe in anything, because I think it's all made up. I think everything's made up. So I don't believe the politics. I don't believe the hype. I don't believe the social media. I don't believe the stats. I also don't believe the wah-wah either. But I love it. I love all of it. I want to hear what people are coming up with and what they have to say. And I have my things that get me through the night, because we're hurling through space on a lump of rock. I believe in things, and I've let things in, and I feel such huge things from them. For example, the lines, the energy lines. Yes, it can be coincidence. Yes, it could be that if you walked anywhere, you would have an amazing experience.
Yeah.
But it felt so purposeful, and it felt so connected, and it felt like, the way I've heard it described is that it's like a more direct phone line to the earth. And that's what it felt like. But possibly, I've never even done a pilgrimage that hasn't been on a line, because the first time we met was on the pilgrimage to Extinction Rebellion. Yeah, with Extinction Rebellion. But that was along the Meridian line. So that was a ley line as well, wasn't it?
Well, it was supposed to be the one that magically enabled the British Empire to be created. It went. Its sort of nub was in Greenwich at the Royal Naval College, which of course is how the empire was created, through naval might, British naval power, and it ran down to the sea by Brighton through this gorgeous English countryside and entered into the Channel in that spot, and there was this flow of imperial acquisition, conquering, and so on, and it never stopped. And there was, England was a relatively small country, but the magic was so strong that they ended up controlling half the world.
Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, all of this is just, I love it, and I think that we need to share it and talk about it, because it's not stuff that you hear in the normal mainstream media. It's just to tickle people's brain and tickle people's hearts and be like, there are other things. There are other ways. And
well, yes, exactly. And, this Shakti, this imagination, the universal love, is the feminine. And I had this thing, right? So all my gods had been masculine up until about 12, 15 years ago. And then the goddess appeared, and it was like Gaia, if you like. It was the feminine of this planet. And then I became a devotee, as it were. I mean, that was the focus of my worship. And I felt very looked after in that. So when, I do meditation groups and so on. So all that was goddess stuff. About February of last year, every week I was praying to her and in community. And it was a very personal, healing relationship. And it was maternal. I am her son. She was always saying, she would say to you, you are my daughter who I love. And you are my son who I love. So it was that. And then this feminine energy that I was worshipping suddenly in February of last year suddenly died and was incorporated into what you might call the cosmic goddess, the original principle, the second only to the creator energy. And that has been the energy that we've been living in since that time. So what would that be, over 18 months? And that's why the world has gone triple bonkers since then. And her mission was, as I heard it, was no abominations. And so the idea of hell was not going to exist anymore. That's an abomination, torturing and imprisoning its souls. All of that was going to change, and everything was going to be restructured, very much in the line of the end times. But it was this cosmic feminine force, unbrookable, no other power. The only power that could equal it would be Shiva, would be the masculine, and they are the best friends known to man, and they work together. There's no way they would oppose each other. They always work together. So lots of people I know have said this thing, I'm going through a process. The worst possible things are happening to me. The things I wanted to least address are coming into my life, and I'm having to deal with them. Sudden deaths, quite dramatic and upsetting things seem to be commonplace. Plus other phenomena like synchronicity and so on are just happening all the time now in kind of hilariously jokey ways to me anyway, so as if they're taking the piss. So we're in this movement, and my feeling was, and this is what the goddess told me. Not many people. So,
if I was going to talk to anyone, I'd talk to you. I was the goddess, so yeah, why not?
Well, I'm in love, I'm in love, and the timeline was the spring equinox of this year. I never get solstice and equinox right. The spring equinox of this year, 2024, to the autumn, the one coming up in September 21st or 2nd. That's this final period for all of us. And there's a kind of clearing out, a massive clearing out, and things that we would never have dreamt of going near because they were invisible to us. They were traumas buried in our early years before we had memory, are surfacing and coming up for healing and so on. Everywhere, it seems to me, certainly in myself. The process was that we would become clear if all we had to do was endure this. So it was happening to us, and that this was the energy, this was the low vibrational energy that was keeping us bound here, other people's stuff that had been put into us. And so all that is clearing out, so that by September time, a lot of people would be clear of these influences. And you mentioned this idea of frequency or vibration earlier, and the whole thing being the entire process is a vibration change. So you can't go through that vibration change when you're carrying all your shit. You can't. You'll just shake to pieces. So it's a health thing, although it's very difficult and unpleasant for most people. Plus, there's this sort of, a lot of souls just aren't hanging around. They're bowing out. A lot of people are dying. I mean, it would be common in my age group that people would die and would get ill and so on. But I'm talking about friends, children, and this, that, and the other, and COVID, whether you put it down to that or not, it's happening. So, yeah, so what happens after September is going to be really fascinating, because there's a possibility that you and those listening to your podcast might be free. And then what?
And what?
Wow.
Yeah, I really enjoy the game. Like, whatever this game is, I really enjoy it. And I feel like in any game, you're only ever given the end of level bosses that you're capable of playing against. And so this end of level boss is, we had the Nazis before in fascism, and it was world wars, and it was vicious and it was nasty, and people had to take sides and all this kind of thing. And it was a very kind of, especially with Return of the Jedi and Star Wars and stuff that came after it, we all know this narrative, like it's the hero and the goodies and the baddies. But this is a way more nuanced difficulty, where we're having to somehow work out how to allow everyone to exist alongside each other within community, because we're all humans and we all deserve to be here and we're meant to be here. But we need to work out how to do it supporting each other and holding space for each other and learning from each other and enjoying what each other's bringing to the table, whilst also looking after the planet and connecting to all the other spirits and beings that are here that also have every right to be here and are bringing something to the party and are really enjoyable to be around, and something to learn from, including the things that we don't necessarily want, like, for example, pube lice. Pube lice are endangered, but we don't want them, so we're getting rid of them. But now there are scientists that are studying them and learning loads of really useful stuff from them. They're having to take it in turns to give each other pube lice. So they're becoming like, kind of keepers of the pube lice, and then passing it on to each other and taking it in turns so that they don't let these things die out. But it's stuff like that. It's like, even if it's not the cute, fluffy thing or the nice, easy to get on with person, they still all need to be here. They still all deserve to be here, because otherwise we're going to end up with just this really banal monoculture, and it being less clear who's the goodies and the baddies, and everything being way more messy, and so many things happening at the same time that we couldn't possibly anticipate. It's not like you could just drop some leaflets and do a propaganda thing like we did in the Second World War. This is people playing with false news on internet. No one knows what's really going on. So we have to find an inner compass and an inner belief in ourselves and what makes us enjoy being alive, like what tickles us, what makes us happy, and standing by that, but also supporting everyone else to find their thing and be in their happiness and in their tickled space as well. And that might not be something that you would connect with or agree with or appreciate, but it's their thing and they're bringing that to the table. We don't want just one monoculture of human beings. We don't want one monoculture of crop, or it will not survive. And we won't survive if we don't, embrace all the differences that we have. I could talk to you forever, but also let's let the universe and the goddess point us in a direction of something that she wants us to talk about. I'm just going to shuffle them. So you tell me to stop. It might not be exactly where you wanted it to stop. There might be a lag on the camera, but we'll...
All right. Well, just about there.
There?
There. Yeah. That one.
It's the moon. And that's the card. It's got the scarab beetle on it. And the Egyptian god of the afterlife, the jackal. I can't remember his name. I had this before, actually. We pulled this one.
Anubis,
Anubis, that's it. That's his name. Anubis.
I love these cards.
This is the Thoth tarot deck, which is Aleister Crowley's. Yeah. So he didn't actually paint it. It was one of the priestesses of his coven or his order painted. And they were all giant oil paintings.
Yes.
But they're absolutely steeped in meaning.
Yeah.
So yeah, the moon card. And in the tarot deck, the moon card is the dark night of the soul. So it's like what you were saying earlier, with things get harder. In the tarot journey, which is the hero's journey, it's almost like layers of onion or layers of things getting harder. So it's like I'm talking about at the end of level bosses increase with what you're capable of. The moon, I think, is the last dark night of the soul before you get the universe, and then you get the fool at the end. So it's properly going there and exploring those hidden places and those dark places because you've done the work. So you've got all this lovely light, but then there's no plateau where you get to sit in a deck chair and just have a pina colada and everything's fine. Like you're always going to be moving on to the next dark place again. Like you get to go there for a minute to this plateau and then you have to go off on the journey again, which is what the Fool is all about.
Yes. God. I think that is absolutely spot on, that card. And it describes what we were talking about just before you drew it. Of course it does.
We'd already discussed the card before putting
it. I always, I do read tarot, and I always think the moon is that it's happening to you, and there is no, you're going to be in a fog, you can't work it out. It's not that sort of energy. It's different, and it's a bit distressing unless you accept it. And a very, very strong card and good way to start.
Mm. So in terms of where you're at the moment, does the moon feel like that's something you're going through or exploring at the moment?
Perfect. It absolutely sums up the fog I'm in. Haven't you noticed? It really sums it up. And yet, the deck I've got, the moon is a journey card also. It's a vital period in anybody's journey. And I think it's probably the bit before you reach the summit. I think it's towards the end of your process. So I hope so, anyway.
Well, it's interesting because in terms of what we were saying, if you actually look at this, it's almost got the energy lines in a ball at the top.
Yeah.
So there's a blue ball and it's got what looks like energy lines weaving in and out. So that looks like the spine of Albion, lines. They interweave.
Oh, yes.
And you've got these waves on the bottom with the scarab beetle. And what the scarab beetle does is that the scarab beetle is guided by the sun and the moon. So it's always moving in the direction from east to west. And when it's a dark moon and you can't see the moon, it follows the Milky Way, they think. But they don't actually know how it does it. But it always follows the off of the sun and the moon. And then it's pushing this little round ball when it does it, the little dung beetle. So that's why the Egyptians worshipped it, because they saw it as being ruled by Ra, the sun god, pushing a little ball across the desert in the direction of the sun, following the sun. But it can do it even when it's dark. So it's about that inner compass and you're owning a journey and knowing inside what's the right thing to do and what's the right direction, and not worrying about it when you're in the dark, trusting yourself, I guess.
Yeah. But also in that card, there's the two towers are there also. I mean, and that's a key part of the moon, is that you have to pass through the official world, through this reality that we're in, and the control systems that keep it going. You have to kind of pass beyond that in order to, but you can see them, so you're close to the end of that particular journey. And in my card, there's a path that leads to a distant hill, but there's no scarabs. I think that, but that's death as well, of course. I'd say that's, I'm taking this entirely personally. I'd say this, this is a good one.
This is accurate for where you're at. And it's the Pisces card as well. And Pisces is the sign of like everything being connected. So, being that we're all drops in a huge ocean, but that we're borderless and boundaryless. And that's what the death aspect is that we're flowing back into the infinite. If you enjoy this podcast, then please consider signing up to my Patreon account, Patreon.com/Jolie Rose, JOLIEROSE. This is a full-time thing for me to be doing. It takes a lot of time and energy for me to create the podcast, and I want to be able to give them away for free. And I want to make this work as accessible as possible, because I just want to share things with the world. I want to share the ideas and stories that are around me and that I'm experiencing, and all the incredible people that I know, and to be able to create a platform for them. But I also need to live, and I need to eat and I can't do this and spend the time and energy this unless I'm getting some income from it. Now, the way that I like to do that, which is generous and an act of kindness, is that if you have the money and you're able to just donate a few pounds once a month to my Patreon account, then it means that I can create the free content. So this is a brilliant opportunity and a creative way for me to make a living, but I do need the support of those who can afford it. If you can't afford it, it's fine, because the content's free and you can just enjoy it, and someone who has got the money is paying. So it's a real lovely cycle of kindness and generosity and people helping each other out. So if you can't support me financially, no problem at all. Please share and tell people about it. If you enjoy it, then someone else probably will too. So thank you so much for your support. I love doing this and I love that you're listening. So huge hugs and thank you so much. Now back to the podcast. So if you want to pick another, tell me when to stop.
Yes, please. On your left.
Yeah.
Further along. There.
The nice one.
Yeah, might as well.
Yeah. Luxury. That's an interesting one. So it's the Four of Cups.
Four of Cups, okay.
Yeah. And it's luxury, so it's some very lovely looking cups pouring into each other. Everything being very...
Damn, that's good. I like the sound of that.
You love a bit of luxury, don't you?
Yeah, Four of Cups. That's, yeah, absolutely. But, yeah. But it's like luxury's no longer suede leather and cashmere. It's much more community, if you know what I mean. It's much more people and, community somehow. And, yeah, that's interesting. Mind you, I'm still quite keen on cashmere. Yeah, it's the Rider-Waite one with the one of the cups coming out of a cloud.
What does that mean to you then?
It's a sort of stuck card. You're stuck under a tree. You're kind of contemplating these three cups that exist, and a fourth one is coming out of a different dimension. Traditionally, they see it as a kind of delusion or illusion that you're having to deal with. But I think in a way it's a kind of really good card for what we were discussing, the times that we're in, where we're sort of 25% in a different space, where it's not the way it was anymore. So, yeah, It's an interesting card. It's always been a troublesome card, I would say. What do you think?
Well, I think it's interesting what you said about luxury, and luxury being something that's more community-based now than what it used to be with the cashmere and the nice things, because that's what I meant when I was saying that it's going to be a bigger shift than it could have been an easier, more gradual change of things with us all moving to renewable energy and doing things differently and going more fair trade and all that kind of stuff. Like if we'd started that in the early 2000s or even, the 90s when we first started worrying about these things, Lisa Simpson, when she first started going on about it, then we should have taken notice. And if we'd taken that amount of time, then it would have been a more gradual process, and possibly the luxury that we're used to would have been more possible. But things are going to have to change in a much harsher way now, I believe. That's why I'm saying it takes imagination, because it's going to be a bigger shift, and it's going to be more of a putting on the brakes with a harder stop. And so luxury is going to shift, and people aren't going to like it. And like I was watching something on the TV recently because I was asked for doing some performing at Glastonbury. I'd asked for some inspiration as to what it was we were trying to get across, and we were doing stuff where we were being influencers and kind of taking the mickey out of the whole capitalist consumerist world. And I got pointed to watching a couple of documentaries, one on a TikTok dance company called 7M. It was called Dance for the Devil, which is unbelievable. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's shocking, about a company of dancers who are in a cult and are still there now. And they live in a house with this guy who takes all their money, and they dance all day for TikTok videos, and are making loads of money. Well, they're making loads of money, but they're not getting to keep it because the people who've left have shared how little they're getting to keep. And that was really shocking. And then also a series about real estate agents in Beverly Hills selling the biggest mansions to the richest people. And they're all Barbie dolls, and it's just the world that they're living in is so different to my reality that it's absolutely mind-blowing. And that's, I guess I hadn't really engaged with the most up-to-date popular culture, mainstream popular culture, for a long time. And it blew my mind that someone in a council house in Braintree, where I grew up, could be watching this programme and that be the reality that they're somehow buying into. And then the TikTok world, and watching these TikTok videos of these people dancing who are in a cult and are being controlled by this person. And I was just like, my God, we've gone mad. And this is luxury, like that's luxury. And how do you ask those people to give up? I don't even know where to begin. Your giant lips or your huge stilettos or your like, how do you ask someone to give any of that up because of a thing called the planet that they don't even know exists? Like, it's just not even there. And then the thing that makes me sad is that these people who are absolutely not even part of that world, who don't have any of the privilege of it or any of the access to any of the luxury that comes with it, are watching that and are themselves devoid from all of the planet and the land, but are not even getting to enjoy the rewards of what this world is that they're watching and buying into.
Yeah.
They're just living in, tarmac and feral pigeons and Greg's Bakers.
Oh my
That's
God.
what really does my head in.
Yeah.
Wow. You're watching this idea of luxury and really not interested in the mud and the flowers and the plants and the stuff that's actually real, that is, the closest to real that you can get is the seasons, the plants, the planet. If there is any bit that is real, it's that. And you're not looking after yourself, you're not looking after your body, you're not healthy, and you have no healthy relationship with what actually is real, and you're watching something that's completely devoid of reality and believing in it, and it's not even your reality. It's not even anything like the world you're living in. So that I find fascinating.
That's what Klaus Schwab means, where you'll have nothing and you'll love it. We will own those little videos and things on our phones or whatever, and that will be our culture. Everything will be containable on digital slivers, and we won't need paintings or record players or whatever. It'll all be there. We'll be happy with it. They will have colonized our imagination, and they will be charging us for it.
Which is exactly what's happening. That's the direction that we're going in.
So many of the certainties have changed. The idea of a welfare state, for instance, when I was brought up, that was always in the background, there was a welfare state. And now that's gone. There's no guarantee anybody will look after you if you're ill. Well, I mean, this is it. We are just, I know this is boring, but it's true. We're in the most unbelievable change. And the Four of Bloody, and part of it is delusion. The Four of Cups.
Yeah, the delusion of luxury and thinking that it's wonderful to have all these things, but actually, what are you going to do with it? You can't take it with you to your grave, and it's all these.
And in a way, it's the second delusionary card. The moon is a delusion too, isn't it? Or it's an illusion, perhaps, but it's definitely a different sort of mindset. Oh, God knows what the third one's going to be, darling.
Okay, let's see.
So
you tell me when to stop.
Yeah, in the middle, maybe and down. That's it. Yeah, yeah. That one you got your thing. Yeah.
It's the sun.
That is so good. Moon and sun.
Yeah, with the moon and the sun, with luxury in between.
I love the artwork. It's so good, isn't it?
It's so good. And this one's got the twins on it, which talks about a lot with Jonathan, the twin, and how we see ourselves as separate, but actually, and it's like I was saying, so if this is the card before the moon, and then you get the universe, and then you get the Fool.
Yes. Okay, so in my deck, the Fool is like the first one, or the zero card.
Yeah, so you come back round. So the Fool is everything and nothing.
Yes.
Go on the full journey, but it's the beginning and the end.
Yes. Gosh. So what do you reckon the sun? I mean, it's rebirth, isn't it? I mean, at least in my card, it's rebirth. Yeah, I'd say that's really good. I think it sums up my predicament and gives me this optimistic denouement.
Good.
Thanks, darling.
It's interesting on this deck as well because it's got each of the horoscope signs surrounding.
Oh yeah,
the disc, and then it's also got the land crowned with the twin, like angels.
Yes.
So I'd say it's almost like it's fully encompassed and supported, and illuminated and celebrated all the different dispositions, all the different personality types. They're all there together in what looks like a kind of summer solstice celebration, and the land is crowned. So the land has got this kind of crown thing on it. And then the angels, these twins, it's almost like the inner and the outer are one. We're all together. They're spirits, they're angels, but it could also be human, like the higher part of us is one again. And we're all fully supporting each other and everyone's there and includes the land as well.
Do you have a sense of your angel, of your guardian, as it were?
To an extent, I have. So I nearly drowned when I was 10 at the Tudor place that I work at Kentwell Hall. And someone jumped in and saved me, who actually looked a lot like you. It was an older man with white hair and looked very much like you. He was thin and wiry, and he jumped in a full Tudor costume. And so, like, my last thoughts were, okay, I was being saved, so it meant that I could relax, and I let go and I blanked out. But I also was concerned for this person who's jumping in because they looked really old and they were in their full woolen outfit. I was just in my shift. So I remember being like, oh God, I hope they're all right, and then blanking out. And then I got saved, but I got saved by a visitor who was in jeans and T-shirt behind me. So no one in Tudor costume jumped in to save me. And that, because of that happening, someone who was a pagan who worked at the place, and this when I was like 13, so this is the early 90s, so it's not like the big pagan revival had happened. It was quite a niche thing, but obviously I was at a Tudor reenactment, which was also a niche thing. He was a beekeeper, and he came up to me and he said, oh, I heard you had a near-death experience. You know that means you're on the shamanic path. And I'm 13 and into Nirvana, and I'm like, oh my God, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. And I didn't really know what it meant, but it was just a useful or interesting thing to have been told. And that affected lots of things that I then went on to do. So when I started doing stand-up comedy and was kind of in the performing world, but I was doing stand-up comedy and was doing quite well, won some competitions and stuff and ended up at Edinburgh and things. But someone gave me a book and it was those For Beginners cartoon books, and the For Beginners book was Clowns for Beginners. And all the way through, it started with a shaman, and it was saying how the shaman was the first showman, and that as soon as we had existential fear and angst, we would want to know how people survive death. And so anyone who did survive death, we'd be like, how did you do it? How did you do it? And they couldn't really express it in words. I mean, we had a lot less words for a start, but also words are coming from the thinking and the outer world. And so we would try and express it, and we'd perform it, and it would become a sacred thing in its own right to see these performances. And people felt like the performances had healing properties and healing qualities.
Yeah.
And so the shaman is the showman. That's where all art originates from. And the earliest art is us blowing ochre over our hands on the walls of a cave, saying we're here, and you can put your hand on that person's handprint and connect over all those hundreds of thousands of years and connect with that person. So I felt like he was an angel, and he put me on this path. But then I also had the very strong connection with the angels, having walked the Michael and Mary line. I'm really feeling Michael as the hand on my back saying, you've got this. And then the hand on my heart was Mary saying, I've got you. And I felt so looked after and protected. I didn't feel vulnerable at all as a woman on my own walking across the country. I felt really safe and looked after and held. And then when I got to Bury St Edmunds Cathedral on St Michael's Day, on Michaelmas, and I arrived there and I got a blessing there. He said, all the angels are with you, and they've been holding you and supporting you on this journey. And I had a vision where I saw all the angels come into me. They're all golden beings, exactly like the sun, like golden beings of light. Michael wrapped himself around me with his wings, and Mary came and held onto my front. But then all the other angels piled in as well, and I got a massive group hug from all the angels. And just this massive ball of golden light held me and hugged me. That was cool.
That story really is incredible, because I also drowned when I was 10.
Oh, wow.
I was doing my Cubs swimming proficiency test, and I started drowning. And a boy called King jumped in and saved me, fully clothed, and saved me. And I failed the test. I mean, how much fair is that? The Scoutmaster banned me from attending the Scouts for 2 weeks as a punishment for scaring everybody, or I don't know why, for that thing. So I just saw it as a negative experience. And of course, when one is told it is a sign of a shamanic thing or whatever, that fellow told you, then it sort of makes sense of it in a way that I never have until now. Now I can see it in those terms, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I never saw King again. It was really weird. He was a boy in my school, but that was what he was there for. Wow,
that's amazing. There's an artist called Scribblist Pip, who's a spoken word artist, and he nearly drowned at 10 as well. I think it might not be exactly 10, but it was around the same sort of age. And he saw an old man, and he then got a stutter. So he has a stutter, but he doesn't have it when he's rapping, like when he's speaking. So he does kind of spoken word freestyling, and it's coming from a different place. And so he just channels, and when he channels, he doesn't have a stutter. When he talks normally, he does.
Wow.
So what do angels mean to you then?
I think they're the elephant in the room. I think that they're a massive part of our lives, but we're turned off to them. I think that we do have a guardian angel, a specific angel. I think that they practice unconditional love. That is the only way they could surely tolerate being with me, for instance. But you know what I mean? There's no judgment involved. But there is some sort of... They've got the script in some way. They know what's supposed to happen, and they help that. I've seen, very rarely do I see anything, but I did want to see an angel, and it was a creature of light. It was as if the element of earth was missing, everything else was similar. It was my angel, and I got this burst of love from it. It was beautiful, and so I was connected with it and never really took it. I took it rather for granted, but at least it was there. And I feel like only now am I able to deepen that relationship. I think I have to, actually, in some ways, that is part of the process. And it would make sense, wouldn't it, to recruit all those powers, as it were. But the thing is, are they on the same level, in the same category as demons, for instance? Are they just the light rather than the darkness? So I don't really know anything about them, and the biblical descriptions, the seraphim and so on and so forth, is fascinating, but I haven't got it. I think if we ever do enter a different dimension, it will be full of angels and others. Look, yeah, I don't understand, but I'm so in favour of them.
Yeah, exactly. Like, even when I was a Christian, it wasn't... My version of Christianity was very Jesus-focused. So
Yeah.
I wasn't really into the kind of biblical demons and like the more Old Testament stuff. It wasn't my bag. It was more Jesus being... I think it was the anarchist in him and the purity of his vision. And
Yes.
That was what I was connected to. So angels have never really been part of my reality until the lines, like the energy lines. That was the first time, just from getting to know who Michael and Mary were in a more kind of esoteric way, really, isn't it?
Yes.
So yeah, getting to know what they represent outside of Christianity, but also, being informed by it.
My mum told me a story when I was about 8, and she said when she was 8, she lived on a farm or island, and the Spanish flu was raging through the land, and they believed it jumped farms, and nobody in her farm was affected by it. And the farm next door, which was her cousin's farm, there were 2 parents and 8 kids, and only my Auntie Bab and her father survived. And he was a giant, 6'5" in those days was a giant, and he was the big local. If a horse got stuck in the bog, he'd come and pull it out. And the death of all his family, he just sat by the fire for the rest of his life and died prematurely. And poor old Bab had to run the whole show. And one of these cousins was laid out in a coffin and in a wake. And my mum was, as an 8-year-old, went into the room. All the social was happening in the kitchen. She went into the front parlour, and she was alone with this child, dead in the coffin. And she saw an angel taking her soul, as my mum saw it, as an 8-year-old Catholic girl, up to heaven. And she told me this story frequently, and it was so matter of fact that I just accepted it. It was like the truth from your mum. Mm. So whenever anything supernatural, as it were, came up after that, I was fully sold on the whole thing.
Yep. Love that. So the last thing we're going to do is the Chaos Crusade. Have you had a chance to think about something that people can do to just disrupt their reality?
Yeah, so I really saw this, and thank you, darling, for all of this. If you are feeling like it's tough at the moment and it's really difficult, then I believe that there are 2 things that can really help, and they're disappointingly banal, but it's G&G, it's grounding and gratitude. And grounding, it doesn't matter, you can just ground wherever you are, you don't need to even take your shoes off. But if you get a chance in the soil, the earth, and you can bury your feet in the soil, plant yourself like a tree, open your arms out like your branches and receive, you'll be grounded and you'll be filled of power. And the other thing is gratitude. And, I'm such a grumpy bastard these days that I find it so much easier to be negative and so on. But whenever I do get my shit together and find something to be grateful about, then, of course, everything changes. The whole mentality changes. So those are 2 active powers you can use. G&G, baby. So that's my contribution to that bit.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. That's perfect. And I hope that I think you have every right to be grumpy. You can do whatever you want, and you can be a hermit and be grumpy, but you have so much to give and so much to share that I really appreciate you doing this, at least.
Yeah. You are my love and inspiration, and thank you so much, darling.
You are mine too. As Ben said, the world's always better if Dennis is around. It does. It feels like you're doing the right thing if Dennis shows up. It's almost like a butterfly or a wild bird, like an exotic bird that comes along and just follows you, and you're like, oh cool, we're doing something right. If this entity's joining in, then I'm on the right path.
Oh, thank you, darling.
Well, thank you so much.